Hey, Professor in class, this is Giovanni. For today's presentation, I will identify four authors and concepts from our readings that I found interesting and worthy of further exploration and discuss their writings in more detail. First, I will discuss the factors that promote mutual gains in negotiation, with a focus on building trust and sharing information. Second, I will continue examining trust by exploring the concept that business negotiations occur at three distinct levels. Third, I will address factors that inhibit effective negotiation, specifically the concept of selective perception. Lastly, the pre-negotiation step and the concept that negotiation starts there. The first concept that stood out to me is on page 48, under the section titled Factors that Promote Mutual Gains in Negotiation. Our textbook explains that one of the most important strategies in negotiation is building trust and sharing information. When trust exists, negotiating parties are more willing to share information, which increases openness and the likelihood of mutual beneficial outcomes. The textbook references the article titled Effect of Trust, Aspiration, and Gender on Negotiation Tactics by Melvin J. Kimmel. In this study, Kimmel examined how trust, aspiration levels, and gender influences negotiation behavior. His experiment involved 70 female and 72 male undergrad students from the State University of New York at Buffalo who participated in controlled negotiation scenarios. Participants were paired into the same gender dyads and observed during the negotiation process. Kimmel found that higher levels of trust were associated with more cooperative and problem-solving strategies, whereas lower levels of trust were associated with more competitive and adversarial tactics. An interesting side note, men were more likely to use competitive strategies, but the overall outcomes were similar across genders. As a future public administrator, I recognize that conflict and disagreements are inevitable. The emphasis on trust, good faith, and transparency is especially important in resolving disputes effectively. Understanding the relationship between trust and productive negotiation outcomes can help establish a firm foundation for conflict resolution, especially in the public sector. Building on the idea of trust, our textbook introduces the concept that businesses negotiations occur at three distinct levels: deterrence, knowledge, and identification. This is found on pages 48 and 49. Deterrence, the lowest level of trust, involves each party making small commitments, and if one party fails to uphold them, penalties are imposed. The second level of trust, knowledge, holds that as dispute and share information, trust begins to solidify, allowing uncertainties to be resolved. And lastly, identification. This level is crucial since it is based on relationships that allows confidence that commitments will be carried out. This concept is based on the article Business on a Handshake, written by Deborah L. Shapiro, Blair H. Shepard, and Lisa Shurskin. This article discusses the importance and prevalence of informal actions rather than formal contracts. For example, in deterrence-based trust, the possibility of consequences prevents a party from breaking their word, which builds trust, even though it is trust at the end of a barrel. Such actions are repeated, creating credibility, and with it, the sharing of knowledge, since trustworthiness has been established. Individuals are more willing to share information, creating a third key factor: relationships. Individuals and/or groups are more beholden to one another due to the repetition of trustworthy actions. As such, their reputation acts as another deterrent against breaking trust. It becomes a hostage. The takeaway here is that as public administrators, we must understand the importance of unwritten rules. The informal norms of keeping your word go further than any legal contract can. The next topic is factors that inhibit effective negotiation and the concept of selective perception found on page 54. Humans fall into the trap of seeing and hearing only what they want to hear, thereby creating a barrier to negotiations. Such actions are usually caused by pre existing biases. One way to lessen the effects of pre existing biases and perception is by being more open, especially during the opening of a negotiation. Our text uses Ronald L. Michelin's research to reinforce this statement. In his article, Effects of Prior Interactions, Contract Strategies, and Expectations of Meeting on-Game Behavior and Settlement, Michelini investigates how previous interactions, interpersonal contracts, and expectations of meeting afterwards shape future behavior and sentiment. This study shows that anticipation of future interactions correlates with a greater likelihood of cooperative actions, and that the first interpersonal interaction has the greatest influence on subsequent interactions when they are positive. Such a study reinforces the importance of first impressions and being open from the start. The public administrator setting the tone to negate preconceived notions is paramount to successful talks. We must let it be known that all parties' perceptions and preconceptions are heard and understood. As the old saying goes, first impressions last. Finally, I move on to the pre negotiation step and the concept that negotiation begins there, which is discussed on page 56. Our text states that negotiations do not start at the negotiation stage, they begin beforehand. It is at this stage that problems are defined, commitment to negotiation has been made, and arrangements for those negotiations have been established. Our textbook uses the article, We Need a Larger Theory of Negotiation, The Importance of Pre-Negotiating Phases, written by Harold H. Sanders, to provide weight. Sanders argues that negotiation strategies have focused too much on the bargaining stage and should instead focus first on the pre-negotiation phases. He emphasizes the importance of having a solid foundation beforehand, including knowing whether both sides can organize and how decisions are made in each camp. This leads to the importance of knowing who the stakeholders are. Once this is established, Sanders identifies the substantive obstacles in a five-part process. That process encompasses defining the problem, producing a commitment to negotiate settlement, arranging the negotiations, the actual negotiations, and implementation. Sanders states that the effective negotiations do not depend solely on tactics, but are heavily influenced by building a relationship first, followed by creating an agenda and ensuring expectations are not just met, but managed, all of which takes place before the actual negotiation starts. Such an article emphasizes the importance of doing one's homework beforehand. As a public administrator, I must know who I am negotiating with, what the actual problem is, not just what I want, and how to not just conduct myself during the process, but also how to make the agreements come to fruition. This concludes my presentation. God bless.